Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're very lucky to have our marketing expert or marketing guru, Andi Jarvis, here with us from Eximo Marketing. And he's going to be talking through 7 questions you need to start before you start digital marketing. We will take questions at the end, so if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and we'll get to those at the end. Over to you, Andi.
Excellent, Joe. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining the webinar today. I like to start every presentation by talking about one of my favourite subjects. And my favourite subject is, let's see if we can get the slides working now. Me. That's my favourite subject. So why am I here? I run a company called Eximo Marketing, a marketing strategy agency based in Belfast but working across the UK and Ireland. I also run a thing called Wi-Fi Refugees, which is what the second logo is. I'll not talk about it too much. Briefly, it's just providing free marketing advice in return for a donation that goes to a refugee charity. And I studied at Ulster University, which is where a lot of the background to this presentation came from. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. If you want to join in on social media at all, the handles are up on screen there. The Andi Jarvis, Eximo Marketing, or Trustpilot, and we'll pick those up towards the end of the presentation as well. So let's jump straight in there. 7 questions you need to ask before you start digital marketing. I think it's important at this stage to point out that we could take the word digital out of there. When it comes to marketing, whether you're doing traditional, digital, or whatever it is that you're doing, the planning phase and the organisation, the thinking you need to do to start this is the same. The thought process is the same whether you do digital or traditional. So, and that will become apparent as we go further and further through the webinar. So, a couple of years ago, I studied at Ulster University for an MSc in marketing, and as part of that process, this was presented by one of the professors as the academic basis for marketing and marketing planning. Now, I sat through that lecture at Ulster University, and I look at that now, and I still have not the first idea what it's about. So we took this process, took it back to the company I worked at the time, and then started to pull it apart and kick it around and try to make it into something more useful. This was academically rigorous, but it was practically useless. And what came out of the back of that is the process that I use now at Eximo Marketing, the 3-step process, which is data, strategy, and implementation. A lot of time in marketing, people jump straight into the implementation. We need to do PPC to get this off the ground, or social media is the answer, without actually going through the data phase, which is what we're going to talk about today, creating a strategy, and then starting to implement it. So what we'll talk mainly about today is the data phase. And to do that, I have a 7-section model, and you can see the 7 sections on there, all beginning with C, the 7 C's: company and customer, context and competition, content, competence, and capital. And the 7 questions you need to ask, you won't be a genius to work this out, come from one from each of those sections. So I'll jump straight into it, and then I'll kind of talk you through how to use the model as we go through. So the first question, which is in the company section, is what do you do? Now, a lot of the time when you ask companies what do you do, they give you a really straightforward answer. Oh, we make watches, or we sell houses, or whatever it might be, we manufacture shirts. Which is fine, but we actually need to dig a little bit deeper than that. We need to actually get into more about what the company does and also how you do it. So I like to talk to companies about mission statements. The problem with mission statements is they've been overtaken by management consultants. And often you end up, when you look at a mission statement, we end up with a shit like you can see on screen at the minute. It feels like it's what the management team do, the senior team or the SMT or whatever you call them in your organization, disappear off for a 3-day retreat every couple of years, come back with a new mission statement that everyone's supposed to get on board with. They're long-winded, they're boring, nobody can ever remember them, and they try and fit everything into them, so actually end up telling you nothing. But I come at mission statements from a different place, trying to boil them down to something that you can remember, something that's catchy, something that captures the ethos of what you do, but also how you do it. And I've got a few examples of those. To embrace the human spirit and let it fly. It's an airline, and it's Virgin Atlantic. Now, not everyone's experience of Virgin Atlantic will be maybe captured in that. Some people have good, some people have bad. But generally speaking, you think of Virgin, and you think of how they work and how they operate, compare that to, say, a Ryanair, for example, and yeah, it captures the ethos of what they do and how they do it. Another one, to give people the power to share and to make the world more open and connected. That's Facebook. It's not about we give you the power to share pictures of when you were drunk the other night, or it allows your granny to see where you've been on holiday. It's about sharing and about connecting people, and that captures the ethos of what Facebook do. Now, it's not just big global companies that can have really tight, succinct mission statements. There's a wonderful marketing agency that's based out of Belfast that has a really short, snappy one, which is Success Starts with Strategy. What that means, it tries to boil down what do marketing strategy, about building success for clients. I could make that into 4 paragraphs if you really wanted, but it just 4 words, and it captures the essence of what I do. And there's an office company, they do office interiors and fit outs, and they've just recently rebranded and relaunched with a really great, and I love this, I don't do any work with them, they're not a client, their mission statement is making space work. Really captures exactly what they do, and that's Calibro. So I'd urge you to sort of understand exactly what it is you do and why, because if you're in-house, if you're trying to create content for your company, you don't really fully understand what you do and how you do it. You can't be authentic with it. If you're in an agency and you're trying to create content, you're trying to do digital campaigns, you're trying to create ad campaigns for a client, and you don't really understand what they do and the ethos of how they do it, you can't be authentic. So it's really important that that's the starting point and you understand how that works. The next section is customer. Who are your customers? Is the question we ask at this point. Now, I run workshops with clients. I talk to small businesses, I talk to big businesses, I talk to charities, I talk to all sorts of different companies of different sizes all across the UK and all across Ireland. And the #1 answer I get when I say to people, who are your customers? Probably more than half of the time, people say to me, Andy, everyone's our customer. And this is the sort of response that they get from me. I absolutely hate it when people tell me everyone's their customer. I show them this picture and say, this is a picture of the Kumbh Mela in India. Happens about every 12 years. It's the biggest peacetime gathering of people anywhere in the world. There are 120 million people come in the 2 weeks that the Mela's on, and on the busiest day, 30 million people turn up on one day. If everyone is your customer, go and take a stand at the Kumbh Mela and sell whatever it is that you sell, and then you'll be rich. You'll have 120 million customers who will buy it all from you, and then you can go and retire. Fantastic, go and do it. The reality is, that's nonsense. Everyone isn't your customer. So in marketing, in a lot of companies, some of you might already have these, some of you might not. I'm at Trustpilot HQ today, and I'm happy to say that actually they do it really, really well. And that's not just because Joe sat opposite me and would throw something at me if I said she doesn't do it well. This is the personas that they use at Trustpilot. There's a couple of great things about this. Firstly, there's a lot of data in there that's segmented really well so you can see it. But this is John. John is a typical marketing executive. If you look at the top right, you'll see that there's other titles there, because do you know what? Sometimes a marketing exec in one firm is the head of marketing in another firm, is a marketing director in a third firm. It really depends on what the company is, whether it's a family business, how big it is. That can all change. So it's not just a typical marketing exec. There's other information there. There's a lot of information on there about what John's interested in, what his challenges are, what pressures he has on a day-to-day at work, how Trustpilot can help him, what blogs would he be interested in, what case studies can we show John, and these are the great things about it. So they can, all this information is there for the staff to use to be able to say, okay, we're talking to John today, or we're going to do a webinar for John, or we're going to do some marketing activity towards John. What sorts of things should we be focused on? But what makes these not just good, but great in my eyes, is what they do with them. A lot of the time, marketing is done by the marketing team, which is great. And we do marketing planning, we create plans, we create strategies, and then we go, well done everybody, we high five, and then we put them down, probably in a bottom drawer, or we use them to stop the table from rocking, and then we start to go, right, okay, we'll just get back on with the day job, and then never see the light of day again. I once had a chat with the strategy director of very.co.uk, the online retailer, and what became obvious talking to him was that the strategy, how good a strategy is, isn't often based on how clever the people are who are writing it, or the interesting little marginal gains that you've managed to put in there, but making sure that you get the right people to deliver it, and that people buy into it when they deliver it. Marketing is not just a technical discipline, it's a human discipline as well. And what makes them great here at Trustpilot is this. This is David. This isn't John. This is one of David's friends. John and David. There's various different personas here, but you can see this sits next to the water bottle in Trustpilot headquarters. When you wander around the office, they're in different places. It brings them to life. Well, if you can bring a cardboard cutout to life, that is. But people can see that all the time when they're wandering around the office. You start to buy into it. They start to understand the problems that David has, what they should be talking to, what they can be doing about them. So it makes it real for people. And by having it real for them, people can start to use them, because there is no point in understanding what your company is if nobody can remember what your mission statement is, and shaping your customer personas if nobody ever remembers them. So make your mission statement something that reflects what you do and how you do it and only you can do. Develop your customer persona so you know who they are, so you now know what your company does and who you do it for. That's the base of the pyramid, and you're in a good place to move forward. So next we jump into context and competition. They're together because in many ways they can look similar. They're like twins, maybe dressed slightly differently, but they often look quite the same. So the question for context is, how's it done in your industry? And the question for competition is, who has your money? You'll notice that it's not who are your competitors, it's who has your money. Because a lot of the time, there's not more money appearing in the world tomorrow than there was today. So you have to take the money that's being spent somewhere else and make it be spent on your products and services. So who has your money? Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of context to the context and show you a couple of slides. Last year, there's a website called Internet Live Stats. I didn't come up with these figures by counting the number of tweets sent every day. But in 2016, the website Internet Live Stats reported that on Twitter, there was 7,367, so over 7,000 tweets globally per second. On YouTube, 69,502 YouTube views every second, not uploads, views of video every second. That's almost 70,000 a second. On Instagram, as I say, this is last year's figure, so it's probably gone up now. There was 785 Instagram posts every second. And Google searches, 60,677 Google searches every single second. Now, I don't tell you this so that you know, well, Andy can use Internet Live Stats. I tell you this to make the point that the internet is full of shit. If you start to jump into marketing and just start to push your content out there, there's just an endless amount of content being published every second of every day, being retweeted, being shared, being repurposed, being searched for. The world is awash with shit content. And if all you're going to do is copy what everyone else is doing in your industry, you're just going to add to that pile of shit content. And I'll give you some examples. If you've ever bought a house, you've been a first-time buyer before. But what you might not have known is how you look like as a first-time buyer. So this is I've got 4 examples here from 4 major UK financial institutions, all of whom you would know of. And this is what one of them says first-time buyers look like. They sit on the floor, buy a box, looking happy that they've just moved into the new house. So then you go to the website of the second one, and you find 2 first-time buyers sat on the floor, looking happy with themselves, buy some boxes in their new house. And then you go to the third, and there's some happy-looking first-time buyers sat on the floor, buy some boxes in the new house. And then you go to the fourth, but these guys are eating pizza, so it is a little bit different. But they're first-time buyers sat on the box of the house. Sat on the floor, buy some boxes in the house. You say, okay, maybe you're just picking on one industry and selecting your example. So let's have a look at the perfume industry. We've got a beautiful woman with the product in the bottom left of the ad there, and some nice big font about the name. And then we've got a beautiful woman and the perfume bottle in the bottom left there, and some nice big font up there with the name of the brand. And then we've got almost exactly the same ad, the same here with a beautiful woman, the perfume in the bottom left, and a nice font telling you the name. This is slightly different again because it's in the bottom right, not the bottom left, but same sort of thing. Beautiful woman, and some font telling you about it, and then the same again, bottom right. And it goes on and on and on. What about the car industry? Here's a Volvo driving away uphill away from a rugged scene. And there's an Aston Martin driving away uphill from a rugged scene. What about BMW driving uphill away from a rugged scene? And here's a Porsche. Now, this is different. The Porsche is parked, but it's still pointing uphill away from a rugged scene. And then the ugliest car ever made, a Citroen Ugly, I think that's what its name is parked uphill looking away from a rugged scene. One last set of examples. I had a look at some estate agents in 4 UK cities, and it was Brighton, Leeds, Newcastle and Liverpool, and you've got Find Your Perfect Home this summer, and another Find Your Perfect Home, and another Find Your Perfect Home, and Let Us Find Your Dream Home. So this one's slightly different, but it's still the same. But what you find is there's industries there, you know, the car industry, the financial services sector, the perfume industry, that spend millions on marketing, yet the best they can do is copy what everybody else is doing. Now, part of this is because when you recruit an agency or when you recruit someone in marketing, you look at the job spec, and a lot of the time it says must have X number of years experience in this industry. So you bring in people with the same ideas, thinking the same things in the same way, marketing the same sorts of products. But if you're really clear about what makes you different, you can use that to stand out. The line I like to use is when nothing goes right, go left. How can you look at what's happening in the industry and use it to stand out? And there's some theory behind that, the 4 Ps of marketing. Some people might say, oh, Andy, there's 7 Ps of marketing now. Or let's go back to the original theory, right, which is 4 Ps, product, price, place, promotion. If you're an estate agent, the product you're selling, you know, you're selling people's houses for them, broadly the same as what's happening up and down the high street. Price, well, you might be 1.5%, they might be 1.6%, there might be somebody else at 1.4%, whatever it is, but it's all broadly similar. It happens in a lot of industries. Place, well, you're all on the same high street. The only place you can easily stand out is on promotion. You know, the only thing that people can't copy is your story. So if you start to look at that and say, right, okay, well, what is it that we do differently? Because then you can start to use that to stand out. So you go back to company and you say, what is it we do? How can we say this and drive this message home to make us look different? Who are we doing it for? The customers. So, okay, how can we go left here? How can we use this information to stand out from what our competitors are doing? And the other thing I would say is when you're looking at your competitors and you need to audit them and look at who has your money, start to look at that and just say, right, okay, what are they doing here? And what do we like about that? What can we do differently? How can we stand out? But one thing I would say don't do is don't just blindly copy. Stop copying your competitors. They don't know what they're doing either. This picture here was a bit of an awkward scene at a wedding I was at a few years ago now, where I turned up in the same outfit as someone else. A terrible, terrible day. But going back to your marketing, the issue here is that you look at some campaigns, and we've all done it. If you've been in marketing for more than a couple of years, you've definitely done it. You've looked at someone's campaign, whether it's on social media, whether it's some TV ad you've seen, and you go, wow, that's fantastic. We should be doing that. Or the chief exec comes down and says, have you seen what they're doing? We should be doing that. Now, all you're looking at is one end of the campaign. You can just see that, right, okay, they've done this, and you might see that they've got some likes and some retweets and some shares. But what you don't know is, has the marketing director been dragged in front of the board and had to explain himself? Has he been sacked for that campaign? Has she decided that actually this has failed on every metric that we've set it? You don't know. All you see is some pretty artwork that's been nicely delivered. So have a look what your competitors are doing, but don't just blindly copy it, because if you do, you're just going to make the same mistakes they're making, except you're not really going to have a better idea because they're already ahead of the curve and have moved on to something else. So understand what you do as a company, who you're doing it for as your customer groups, how you can be different, how you can stand out, what are the competitors doing, and how can you make that different for you. And then you get to competence. And the question I ask here is, what skills do you have? This isn't just you as a person, it's you as a department, you as a company, the agency relationships you have. What skills do you have? What skills can you tap into? I have seen several times where people say, right, well, the best way to reach our target market is video, or we need to create a new website to do this. And then say, okay, well, why haven't you done it? Well, we don't have anyone who can do that. So you've spent the time looking at what's the best way to get your message to your customers, and then decided to move away from it because you haven't got anyone to deliver it. If you work in an agency, don't just recommend solutions because you have the skills in-house to do it. Outsourcing, bring in the right partners to deliver something. Start with the customer and work backwards. What is it the customer wants? How are you going to get that to them? How are you going to get that message to them? And if you keep doing that, then you say, okay, we don't have the skills to deliver that. Well, that's all right. Where can you find the skills to deliver it? But be honest as well, because sometimes people will tell you in-house, like, oh yeah, I'm a great photographer. Well, are they really? Oh no, I'm a brilliant copywriter. Are they really? Be really honest, because it's much better to have those honest discussions with people and say, look, this isn't up to scratch. What are we going to do about it? Rather than putting it out into a campaign and making a complete mess of it. And then we move on to content. question with content is, what stories can you tell about your business? It's not, how do we create viral content? It's not, what blogs can we write? It's, what stories can we tell? But importantly, again, start at the beginning. What's our company mission? What is it that we do that nobody else does? Or how do we do it that's different? Who are we doing it for? How are we going to be a little bit different to the competition? And then say, right, okay, well, what content we're going to create that's going to help achieve those things? And that's where you start with content. But a lot of the time with content, we start looking internally. And a lot of the best content is external. A study by Influence Central found that 91% of consumers trust a review more than a salesperson. That probably isn't as surprising as you'd think. Customer reviews, other people, independent people saying, great, I use this and here's the reasons why. So, of course, why not use your customers? Why not use that to drag it in and use that content there? And I go back to talking about estate agency. This is Purple Bricks, customer of Trustpilot. Getting our customers to speak about our brand on a third-party platform is far more valuable than us trying to say it ourselves. It carries a lot of punch when you let other people tell your potential customers how good you are. And then you start to look how Purple Bricks have used this, and they've driven it across a lot of their marketing. You go on their website and you'll see that there's Trustpilot 5 stars, but they're also putting out over 25,000 reviews. They've put that information in there, which then helps to build that trust and to get other, and you can click on that and it'll take you through, and people will tell you about their Purple Bricks experience. You go onto their Facebook page. This is a slightly older screenshot. You can see there's only over 18,000 reviews there. But they start to use it across all their marketing to pull that in. So they say, right, okay, what stories are we going to tell? Well, let's let other people tell that story for us. There's a whole different webinar on different ways to create content looking internally. But what I'm saying is, have a look. You've just done competence, and you'll be looking at people in your business, people who are connected to your business, and see what great stories you can tell that help connect your business and the way you do it to your customers. But once you get those stories, what I would say with content is think about fab content. Fab is a concept that's been around in the advertising sector for years and years and years. Hasn't quite filtered in, as far as I'm concerned, deep enough into the content marketing sector. Fab stands for features, advantages, and benefits. And what I would say with that is it's about making your content stronger so that people will buy into it. So if you want to look at a feature, I'll give you a vacuum cleaner example. You've got a Hoover, just launched to the market, and you go, we've got a 400 watts of suction Hoover. If your competitor launches a 500 watts of suction Hoover, a lot of people's brains are hardwired to just think, well, that's better. It's got 500 watts, that's got 400 watts, that must be better. And you might start losing sales. So what's the advantage? And so, okay, we've got 400 watts of suctions. What's the advantage of that? The advantage of that is, okay, it pulls the allergens out of your carpet better because it's got 400 watts of suction. Brilliant, okay. So now you're starting to put a little bit of a clear blue light between you and clear daylight between you and your competitor. But then, so what's the benefit of having all the allergens pulled out of the carpet? Well, you can live in a healthier home with your children because there's not as many allergens in there. You go, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now you've got a feature, 400 watts of suction, an advantage, pulls all the allergens out of your carpet, and a benefit, live in a healthier home with your children. But the key to this is then to tell that story backwards, benefits, advantages, features, because when you do that, it gives it more power. So if you start to look at content and say to people, live in a healthier home with your children, because our vacuum cleaner sucks more allergens out of your carpet thanks to its 400 watts of suction. You tell the story that way, benefits, advantages, features, and it gives it more power. It starts to appeal to the more emotional side of your brain. And when you tap into emotional purchase decisions, you start to get a lot of power from that. When people start to rationalize purchase decisions, you start to lose customers. You look at some of the thinking behind landing pages on websites and shopping cart pages on websites where you take a lot of the other information away from that. That's trying to stop people from rationalizing a purchase decision. It's about getting them to do the one thing you want them to do before their emotional brain turns off and their rational brain turns on. So think about features, advantages, benefits, but then tell the story benefits, advantages, features. The other thing I would say, and it goes back to that opening slide where we talked about marketing and digital marketing, is on and offline have to work together. I know there's a newspaper up there, which might be a strange concept to many of you on there. Certainly many marketers these days don't ever look or consider about newspaper advertising. But if you have a customer who reads a newspaper, some people still do, believe it or not, They don't turn into a different customer when they put their newspaper down and pick their iPhone up, or when they get to work and start to look at a computer screen. They are still the same customer. Online and offline have to work together. And here's another company that do it really, really well. Fords of Winsford. They use their Trustpilot ratings on their TV campaigns as well. It runs across online and offline. They've got the star rating you can see here in the bottom corner of their ad, which shows, and it says, look, we're 5 stars on Trustpilot. It starts to build that because people are your consumers in different ways. They don't put the phone down and go, I'm a traditional marketing consumer now, and pick the phone back up and go, now I'm a digital consumer. People exist as people. So once you know who your customer is and you know what you do as a company, you know how you're going to stand out from your competitors. You know what skills you have in-house to be able to do it. You now know what content you can create that's going to help you achieve all those things, and you can use those bits to help stand out. I would also say as well, there is a very old-fashioned thing that when you start to look at content and content planning is your best friend. And I would urge everyone who's planning marketing to get one of these. It's a good old-fashioned wall planner. I love digital tools. I love Trello. I love things that organize me like that. I use my calendar online. I use all of that stuff to plan my work. But I've worked in companies of all sizes. I've worked with huge global brands. I've worked with small startups. I've worked with family firms. I've worked with charities. And where I see marketing work best is when people have a visible planner for their content. It's stuck up in the office, people's names are put on it, and when the names are on it, they then have to buy into it and go, right, okay, I'm supposed to deliver this by this date at that time. You do that, people buy into it, and it happens. Like I said, marketing is a human discipline, not just a technical discipline. And then we're on to the last C, capital. The question is, what's it worth to your business? The question isn't, has it driven your cost per click down? Or has it boosted the likes on Facebook? Or how many retweets did you get? It's what's it worth to your business. When you start talking to finance officers, when you start talking to managing directors and CEOs, you start talking to them about what matters to them. And it's rarely vanity metrics. How many more units did we sell? What difference has it made to the bottom line? What's our margin been on the products that we sold? That's the sort of thing. So what's it worth to your business? Every business has different metrics. But start with the key thing. Is it helping your business achieve what the goals are? And then work backwards and see what digital metrics you can use to support that. Now, one word of warning, bit of old marketing theory for you again. ADA, awareness, interest, desire, action. Focusing on what it's worth to your business can often lead you to this point where you just focus on action. Focusing on the people who are going to buy now, focusing on the people right at the end of the purchase funnel who are going to jump in and take action and do something with you right now, which is fine as far as it goes, but you have to remember that if all you ever do is focus on action, at some point you're going to run out of people in that funnel. So I would say that even though focusing on what it's worth to your business, make sure that you also do the awareness stuff, the brand awareness stuff, and keep pushing people in the funnel so that you can keep converting them. This is a guy called Mark Ritson, Professor Mark Ritson. He has a column in Marketing Week, which you can sign up for if you like. I would urge you to do it. It's funny, it's entertaining, and it's great. Mark has a bugbear. You can read that on screen, but one of the things he says is that there's over 220 metrics that Facebook will give you for their advertising campaign. Again, I haven't been through and counted. I'm taking his word for it. I know that if any of you wanted to do this, you could give me the worst campaign you've ever worked on, the biggest turd you've ever worked on. You give me that, you give me access to your Google Analytics, access to your social analytics, and within an hour, maybe 2 hours, I can produce you a report that will tell you this campaign was the best ever. You know, views were up, or the amount of time people engaged with the video went up, or, you know, click-throughs were fine, and all of these metrics that say, look, this was fantastic. But all that does, when you take that report that says this turd of a campaign was brilliant and you hand it into the chief exec or the finance officer or the director of marketing, you blow your credibility out of the water. Because people pick that up and look at it and go, right, this is brilliant. You've given me a report that says everything is wonderful. How many more units have we sold? Has our margin gone up? And you can't answer those questions, or if you do answer those questions, it's always a terrible answer. And you lose your credibility. So if things go wrong, be honest, things went wrong. But here's how we're going to change it next time. And so always put the learnings in there. And that's the beauty of having so many metrics, is that you can try and find where the learnings are and use it to get better next time. But don't just say everything was wonderful when everything was awful. Because at the end of the day, to most businesses, charities are a bit different, public sector is a bit different, but to most businesses, at the end of the day, it's all about the Benjamins. They're only interested in what's bringing back something for the bottom line. So focus on that as kind of your number one metric, and then look at what other activity, what other metrics you can use to support that. So I'm going to take a break from talking now. There are, you can jump in on Twitter if there's questions coming in. I'm going to give over to Joe, have a drink, and then we'll go through any questions that we've got.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andy. I think that was really insightful. We are going to take questions for Andy. So if you have a question, then please submit it using the question panel on the poll, and we will we'll try and answer all of those questions. If we can't get through everyone's questions, then Andy will personally respond to everyone after the webinar. So the first question for you, Andy. Do you have to ask the questions in this order? This question just come in.
Yeah, there's been a lot of thought, and that order has changed once or twice, but there is a lot of thought and the academic background to that. Starting with company and customer is the really important, but you have to get those two questions. Now, if you ask it customer and company, I don't think it makes a huge difference, but you've got those two as a base of your pyramid. But after that, I think it's really important to keep the order, because when you get to the end of capital and you start trying to measure how good it is, you go back to the beginning and you say, what do we do as a company and who do we do it for? How are we going to stand out from our competitors? What do we need to outsource? Do we need budget? Do we need to recruit? What content are we going to create? And then you can start to say, well, and here's how we're going to measure it. And if you ask them in that order, you then start to get a powerful way to, if you do need more budget, you've actually got a rigorous academically backed process that takes you through and says, right, okay, here's all the questions we've asked. And look, you want us to achieve this, and it'll bring in £1 million for the business if we do this. Our budget of 30,000 is not going to be enough, and here's the reasons why. So if you ask it in that order, it does have a lot of power to it.
Okay, perfect. Another one that's just come in. Are there any types of companies that this framework won't work well for?
I've used this with charities, with not-profits, with family businesses, sole traders, big companies, small companies. When you get into working with huge companies, a lot of maybe massive online retailers, there could be a bit of an issue there, because when you start to look at the different personas, that could be, you might have different groups. If you sell a huge product range, every SKU, every range might have a different type of persona, which could make this maybe a little bit bulky to use. But generally speaking, it's a robust framework that works for, I would say, 99% of businesses out there.
Another question, what do we do when we have all of this information? What are the next steps?
So this is step one of a 3-phase process. So you've got data, which is what we've done now. We've got all the data together, and now this is where you use all your marketing knowledge to create the strategy. So you have the data, then you start thinking, pull everything apart and start to have a look, and you then say, right, okay, how do we manage to move all these pieces around and come up with a strategy that's going to help us create the content to drive this to the customer time and time again. So that's where your knowledge and your marketing skill comes into it. So yeah, you know, I would say that. And then when you get to implementation, I think that's also really, really important, because like I said, marketing is a human discipline. Having the best strategy in the world that nobody else buys into is pointless. So who do you need to influence to be able to make that happen? It might be heads of department, it might be managing director, it depends on what company you're in. But what I would say is, when you're doing this data phase, the people who you need to influence down the line, involve them in this. Because if they're involved and they start to see, you hear it a lot in companies, marketing is just the guys who've spent money, or the Ministry of Pretty Pictures, or Department of Colouring In, and that type of thing. If you involve those people who you need to influence, whether it's finance, whether it's sales, whether it's customer service, involve them in this process. And then when you get to the implementation, they'll already be buying into it.
Just have one more question come in. What if you don't have something which separates you from your competitors, or there is not a difference from the customer's point of view?
Yeah, good question. We get that a lot when I work with clients, and sometimes, you know, not everybody works in something that's interesting or exciting. Some people make, you know, rubber widgets or rubber stops for doors and things like that. What I would say is that kind of focuses entirely on the product. Sometimes it's the way that you do it as well. It might be the delivery service, it might be the time, it might be your post-sales support. There could be lots of different little things there that actually, when you bundle them together, you rarely find one thing. There's usually 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 smaller things that when you put them together can make you different. So if you think, someone said, well, why should we buy your product over their product? That you said, well, you'd use us because of our, our after-sales service. We've got UK-based call centers, and okay, you're selling exactly the same product. Electricity, and if you look at the power companies, for example, if you buy your electricity from Empower, or you buy your electricity from British Gas, or you buy it from Scottish Power, it's exactly the same electricity. So if you don't think there's a difference in your product, go and have a look at what the power companies do and how they differentiate themselves, because they are selling exactly the same product as everybody else. So they start to look internally about how they do things, the British Gas way of doing it, the Empower way of doing it. So that's a place I'd go to. Go and have a look at the big 6 energy firms, see how they separate themselves, and then you start to go, okay, maybe it's the people, maybe it's how we work. But so I just need to add on to that as well. I know it's my big bugbear. When people say our people make us different, that probably comes up 50% of the time. What makes you different? Our people make us different. Brilliant. Go and have a look at your website if you do say that. Because I guarantee when you go onto the website, there isn't a picture of anyone of your organisation there. There's a product on there. You go on your social media, there might be one picture from the Christmas party last year on your social media. If your people are genuinely the thing that makes you different, when you get to the content bit, if that's not filled with stuff that comes about your people, you're missing a trick, or they don't make a difference. It's one or the other.
Okay. And one last question. Which bit of data do you find is the most valuable or useful in answering your questions to form your strategies?
I love this question. You tend to find that people sit on both sides of the table and throw things at each other, qualitative and quantitative data. So you'll have somebody going, yeah, but the Google stats tell us this and Facebook stats tell us this, and because it's a number and a percentage, we tend to think of it as more robust data. But both of them are really important. So the stats and the data that you get, a lot of the time, show you what's happened previously. They don't necessarily predict the future. You've got to use your skill to do that. But it's called triangulation of data. If you just look at numbers, you're going to miss out a lot. There's a lot of colour to come from the qualitative data, from talking to people, customer interviews, talk to your customers, see what happens there. But if you've got anyone who interacts with customers, whether that's someone who deals with complaints, someone who deals with customer service, a sales team out on the road, they have to be involved in this process. And you have to pull both bits together. It's all right saying, well, we know that our postcode data shows that 70% of our people live within a 25-mile radius of us. That's great. But actually now talk to your sales team and say, right, so what is it when you're out on the road, when you go and talk to Mrs. Briggs, what does she say to you? You put those two things together, and actually what you've got is really powerful data then. So it's not that qualitative is not data or quantitative is right and wrong. You need to look at it all. You need to put all the pieces out, and that's the strategy phase. When you've pulled all that together, you put it all out and you go, right, okay, how do we use this to improve our company, to get to that goal we set in capital, to make our company better, to achieve it's all about the Benjamins to achieve that.
Great. Okay, so I think that completes our Q&A session, and I hope everyone's enjoyed the webinar. Certainly from Trustpilot's perspective, big thank you to Andy for coming in and sharing his knowledge and wisdom. We will be sending out a recorded version of the webinar that you can watch after. So please do share it with your colleagues, friends, family, anyone who's interested.
Mm-hmm. And if there's any questions you didn't feel brave enough to ask, please just drop us a tweet and we'll pick up from there.
Great, thanks everyone.